They simply don't make games like Mafia anymore.
The simple gameplay, rich storytelling, incredible voice acting, and immersive environment truly makes it a memorable and enjoyable experience. The original Mafia was released in 2002 for the PC, and later in 2004 for the Xbox and PlayStation 2. I was 2 years old at the time in 2004, thus I did not play this game on release. Might come as a shock. From what I gathered, development on the game began in 1998 when I was minus 4 years old. Game director Daniel Vavra, I'm hoping I said that correctly, was reportedly inspired by the mob movies of the 1990s because let's be realistic, who wasn't? There are plenty of absolute classics to pull from. Donnie Brasco in 1997, The Godfather Part 3 in 1990, Goodfellas also in 1990, Bugsy in 91, and before you ask, yes, that was a real person and mobster. Bugsy Siegel was his name. My point is, he had plenty of material to pull from. Now, Daniel's goal was to tell a grounded, realistic, and deep mob story, and boy did he nail it like I would like to do to Sabrina Carpenter. If my girlfriend watches this video, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Now that that's out of the way, apparently Daniel originally thought about focusing on the police perspective before settling on the mob, which I think in retrospective was the right idea. The original developer was Illusion Softworks, and published by Gathering of Developers. If that doesn't sound like some Magic the Gathering nerd shit, I don't know what does. However, they would later be acquired by Take-Two or 2K Games, which we should all be familiar with. I've never played this build of the game, however it was extremely successful, selling over 2 million copies by 2007. I was just 5 years old then, and not yet playing video games where brutal mobsters shoot people in the head. My mother was strict in that aspect. The build of the game I've played and will be talking about today arrived in 2020, the year of the virus. I should probably introduce myself. Where are my manners? My name is Wild Big Skies. I stream on Twitch primarily on the weekends and sometimes make YouTube videos. The best place to find me is at twitch.tv/wildbigskies. Now that the pleasantries are over with, let's talk about Mafia, the definitive edition. Released in 2020, the year of Corona, developed by Hangar 13 and published by 2K, Mafia Definitive Edition arrived. I did not play the game on release, but since have played it twice, just recently completing my second playthrough, all of which was streamed over on my Twitch. I will be going over as much about the game in this video as possible, including the setting, soundtrack, story, and characters, and at the end, I'll cover some of the differences between the original version of the game and the game as I know it. Let's begin with the setting. Mafia takes place in the fictional city of Lost Haven, a somewhat hybrid of New York and Chicago. The city includes a harbor and an airport, which was a big deal back then, bustling nightlife, and of course, rival gangs vying for power in the struggling 1930s economy of America. This is the Great Depression era, the Prohibition era, and the rise of Nazi Germany, the uncertainty in the world, but there's money to be made for those who are willing to bend the rules just a little bit. The city itself is done incredibly well. NPCs roam the streets, the roads are filled with traffic of all kinds, taxis, trucks, police cars, which during my playthrough, I seem to continually play the game of, let's give the traffic a love tap, which may or may not have brought some police attention, which may or may not have failed me on a couple of missions, but that's neither here nor there. The map feels big, bigger than it really is, which is a sign that it's done well. It really pulls you in. While driving any number of the beautiful 1920s and 1930s cars, you have several radio stations you can listen to that are all historically somewhat accurate. I'm a true sucker for detail like this and absolutely love that. You can sometimes tune in to hear speeches by Roosevelt or a radio host worried about Hitler and the rising tension in Europe. Baseball scores, or even news reports surrounding crimes that you're committing in the game, which I found particularly hilarious. And of course, classic 1930s musics, which is quite the vibe if you want my opinion. The city consists of a central island in the middle with boroughs surrounding it, just like New York City. Given the map calls the region St. Paul's Coast, and during the story there's a reference to blaming something on guys from the East Coast, I'm also going to make the assumption this fictional city is set in the West Coast. The map also includes some surrounding farmland. The city offers up plenty of alleys to duck your way through during a car chase, which there are plenty of in this game, so if that gets your blood going, this won't leave you disappointed. I quite enjoyed this game's environment, and I can't help but make the GTA comparison here. If you have played the game or do, you will surely know what I'm talking about. Although the story and gameplay is set up much more linearly than Grand Theft Auto, the map feels much like a 1930s GTA, including the ability to shoot civilians at different points, steal cars at others, which you can then bring back to your garage and use at any point later when you need a car. The similarities are right in front of us. I'm not going to get into what inspired what or what's better than what, but I'm going to merely state that I found the sensation I was somewhat playing a Grand Theft Auto game set in the 1930s quite strong, and I loved it. The map includes plenty of collectibles for those who enjoy picking up random shit and seeing a digital number increase until a goal is completed, so that's cool. The music is something else that stood out to me about this game, and I'm talking about the soundtrack, not the radio stations, which also include a lot of bangers. I'm talking about the orchestral score in the Definitive Edition that was composed by a man named Jesse Harlan and recorded with the Prague Philharmonic Orchestra. He did an excellent job of setting the tone throughout the story and in between, so shout out to that guy. Now let's get into the characters and the story of Mafia. There will be spoilers ahead, consider this your fair warning. The game is 21 years old, given the original, and 5 years off the remake, so if you haven't played it yet, that's on you. Mafia follows the story of Tommy Angelo, cab driver turned mobster overnight. The game is framed through the eyes of Tommy, telling a grizzled old Irish detective a story about the past 8 years of his life at a secret meeting at a small diner. It's clear Tommy's stressed and in trouble, but it wasn't always like that. He's looking for a way out, and he needs the man in front of him's help, so he goes back in time and takes us with him to 1930. Tommy's out by his cab having a cigarette when two mobsters run up on him carrying guns, seemingly in a hurry, and demand that he drive. You will later learn their names are Paulie and Sam, two central characters to this story. Tommy obliges and is able to escape with the mobsters from whatever heat was on them, to which he is rewarded. This intro to the game couldn't be better. An intense car chase, mobsters threatening your life if you don't help them escape, it sucks you into the lawless world of 1930s crime. Everyone and everything was fair game. The driving mechanics in this game are simple but difficult to master, especially for the first time being chased down by gunmen. Tommy continues to work as a cabbie, until one day he's found by the guys who were chasing the men he helped escape. He's beaten and his cab gets banged up. He goes back to the restaurant where he dropped the men off the other night, a place he is seemingly familiar with and aware of it being a mob front business for a man called Don Salieri. When he explains to Paulie and Sam what happened, they insist on him telling the Don personally, and quote, the Don's gonna want to know about this. Tom is brought into the back room of the front restaurant and introduced to the big man himself, who he explains to what happened, and is offered by the Don a chance to retaliate on the men who beat him up. Those men belong to another mob run by a guy named Morello. Tommy accepts, and this brings us to the next mission, where you sneak into one of the rival mob's parking lots behind one of their front businesses and beat up a couple guys and torch a few cars in revenge. This mission introduces you to some of the stealth aspects you'll see throughout the game, as well as hand-to-hand and Molotov mechanics. It was a fun mission, and if you're putting yourself in Tommy's shoes, you want to get back at the guys who roughed you up and smashed up your cab. When they get back to the restaurant, Paulie and Sam inform the Don that Tommy did great, and the Don offers him an opportunity to put his life of cab driving behind him and earn a little more money and find a little more comfort and adventure joining the life of the crime family. Tommy accepts and joins the mob as a low-level enforcer. The next chapter is somewhat subdued. You're tasked with collecting money from some businesses under extortion, including a bakery and a hotel. In this chapter, you drive around the city collecting the money and solving any trouble that arises, when people don't want to pay or some rival goons intervene. Fair Play is a real standout chapter for me. Having such a passion for racing and history, obviously with that, the history of racing, this chapter really itches me in all the right places. The Don has bet heavy on an up-and-coming racer in a Grand Prix set to hit the local track in Lost Haven. Only thing is, Morello, chief rival in the city, has brought in a hotshot European driver to compete in the car that he has bet on. And we all know just how good Europeans are at driving formula cars. For God's sake, Logan Sargent, you let us all down, man. This chapter is awesome. The Don can't take any chances he might lose, given the fact he's told everyone in the neighborhood to bet on his guy, and he will financially decimate his territory worse than the Great Depression already has. What a genius. He sends Tommy out to steal the opponent's car and bring it back to Ralphie's, the mob's local on-the-pay mechanic, to boost the race car before tomorrow's race. And this is phenomenal. You get to steal a 1930s Formula type car in the middle of the night and rip it through the city. I only managed to crash it a few times before I got it back safely. After being boosted, the car is returned, but somewhat unrealistically, because there's no way no one noticed a race car tearing through the city streets in the middle of the night. It's not exactly quiet. Anyway, the next day is race day, and at the track Frank approaches you while you're having a smoke with Paulie and Sam to inform you Morello was also planning ahead of today's Grand Prix. Side note, Frank is number 2 in the family and the Don's right-hand man, a tall and thin man with a real mystique to him. Anyway, Morello had the up-and-coming driver of Salieri's favorite car beat and sent to the hospital. So who do you think's got to step in with the weight of everyone's bets, hopes, and dreams riding on his shoulders? That's right, Tommy Angelo. This is where the real fun begins. You get to race a 3-lap race around an old-school course with high bank turns, a hairpin, and certain death around every corner. It is absolutely incredible. My only complaint is you don't get to qualify and have to start in the back. But I can't say much more than that because this is an amazing level and probably one of my favorites in a game of all time. The uniqueness of throwing a race into a mob game is such an awesome set piece to me that I can't applaud the developers enough. This is absolute W creativity. Of course, you win the race and the day is saved. Now the next chapter sees you asked to escort a young woman home at night because apparently she's been being harassed by some thugs. Now this is no ordinary woman. This is Sarah. She is the daughter of a man named Luigi. These days Luigi likes to clean glasses and pour drinks at the restaurant. But as you're told by Paulie, back in the day, Luigi was a stone-cold killer and a close ally of the Dons. Of course Tommy agrees to escort her home and deal with any trouble that comes up. On the walk, Sarah is shown to be kind, giving leftovers to a poor family. Her and Tommy talk and somewhat flirt, but not in an obnoxious way. I find the romance really compelling and beautifully done in this game. Surely, some thugs are waiting around her apartment, and they start to talk that smack to Tommy. You then beat all their skulls in, which they well deserved. The next chapter is another pretty routine day in the life of a mobster. Shakedowns, some intel gathering, and even another high-speed chase, which is truly one of my favorite features of this game. Can't say enough how much I love the constant chases. Then you are sent to kill a corrupt priest in a brothel. This chapter sees Tommy confronted with the grim reality of murder, and the game hints that he may be a little soft in that department compared to the coldness level desired by the Don of his men. You also end up killing a son of a town councilman, which ends up being somewhat important later to the story. You then must escape the police, which in and of itself is somewhat routine for the game, but fun and challenging in its own right. A trip to the country sees a change of scenery for Mafia. You're sent with the boys out to a farm to complete a deal. When you show up, something is clearly off, and you're forced to split up with the gang to try and find a sense of what's going on. This level has a sort of eeriness to it. It's almost spooky and horror game-like. A foggy, mysterious farm with seemingly abandoned and derelict equipment and buildings to search through. It's not too long before you're ambushed by some men who clearly want you dead. Things have gone south with this deal, and you're still separated from your friends. After a few shootouts, you meet back up with Paulie, but Sam's missing, so you set out to try to find him. He ended up being taken captive and beat up and thrown in a barn, guarded by more men. The ensuing shootout sees you take control of the barn and rescue Sam, only to find him shot and in rough shape. Paul instructs Tom to guard him while he goes back and gets the truck. Shortly after he leaves, the police show up, and that leads to another shootout. The cover shootout is a big part of this game, and in one sort of critique can get somewhat repetitive, but it's still pretty enjoyable. I'm merely pointing out one could criticize this game for being cutscene, drive, shootout, repeat, but the story really carries over this aspect and the reality of the game. Paulie eventually shows up, but the cops are hot on your tail, and they have brought a ridiculous vehicle. A massive armored car with a machine gun mounted on top. It's basically a fucking APC. The Volin car chase is awesome, as you can probably assume, and obviously, our guys managed to escape. Omerta is a serious chapter, as the name carries that weight. the sacred Mafia code to never speak on family activities or what you do, see, or who you know. There's a traitor in the family, and the Don must find out who it is. This is a longer chapter, and sees you following clues throughout the underworld, only to discover it was Frank, the Don's best friend and number 2 man, the entire time. He was approached by the feds and folded. The Don is furious and sends you to kill Frank, the only retaliation for turning to the feds. This leads you on a hunt that ends at the airport where you find Frank. After a shootout with a bunch of feds and cops protecting the government's new top witness, after massacring probably 25 federal and local law enforcement, which is just insane how throughout the game Tommy has gotten away with just killing hordes of people over and over, but whatever, it's a fictional story. You find Frank preparing to board a plane with his wife and daughter. Frank explains to you why he did it and that he wants out. It was a truly emotional scene, and the cutscene was masterfully put together. In the end, Tommy doesn't have the heart to kill Frank and lets him go, leaving the player with the question, what would you have done in that situation? The next chapter could easily just be titled Assassin's Creed. No, seriously, you are sent to rob a rich person's house and break into their safe. With you is sent an Italian man shipped in just like a tool to just do this one job. We don't get to know him very well because he only speaks Italian, but he seems like a cool enough chap. You sneak through a maze of bushes and stealthily take out guards before entering the house, finding the safe and breaking in. Of course, you set off the alarm and must escape under the pressure of the police. This is a fun level, but having played so many Assassin's Creed games, I really just felt like that's what it was, and I was here playing Assassin's Creed. Maybe I'm just brain dead like that and couldn't really appreciate the level for what it was. The next chapter is more of the routine mob chapter. You set up a deal for booze, although I will say with quite the interesting character. One could easily say it's an obnoxious caricature of someone from Kentucky. It goes south and you get into a shootout in the parking garage. This level is fun and mixed up the set piece a little bit. The ending car chase that sees you drive directly through a poor section of town is awesome. Yes, I know that may sound a little bad, but trust me on this one. Bon Appetit is where it really gets real. If it wasn't real enough already. Tommy, or you, however you want to put it, are invited to dinner with the Don at one of his favorite restaurants. You arrive and can barely start eating when your dinner is interrupted rudely by gunmen who'd rather shoot the entire place up than allow you to enjoy your meal. What follows is another shootout where you personally escort the Don to safety. He is furious, which fair enough chap, and he demands that you take him immediately to the only person who knew where he planned to be that day. Carlos. You find the betrayer in bed with a woman. Not the ideal time to have your furious boss walk in on you. Carlos makes an escape, but Tommy chases him down and puts a few bullets in him while he tries to climb a ladder. The Don then stomps his head into the pavement in a disgusting display of his authority. No one was to betray the Don. Happy birthday! And for one politician, the next chapter in this mob story sees his birthday present sent to him from the Don. Tommy, Polly, and Sam are tasked with making a public display of his hand by shooting the man at his birthday party being hosted on a ferry. This level is really entertaining, and again I have to applaud the developers for the set piece choice. A ferry is really unique, and I thought it was awesome. It has a lot of Hitman vibes here. You dress up as a sailor, sneak aboard, wait for the fireworks to start, and do your job. Only to get into another shootout and escape via a speedboat. What's more James Bond and awesome than that? The next chapter is where the war really begins to heat up with old pal Morello. You are sent after his number 2 man and apparent little brother, Sergio. And since I'm such a big F1 fan, shout out to Sergio Perez. You did not deserve the axe at Red Bull. This level has it all. Shootouts, motorcycle chase, and as the entire game has done, it absolutely nails it. This game could easily be compared to a mob TV show, and it would be awesome. You eventually catch up to the doomed man and set him on fire while he's alive. Really quite brutal, actually. Now that the number 2 man has been knocked off, it was time to go for the big guy himself, Morello. This level also includes all the previous mentioned Mafia tropes or mechanics, whatever word suits you. Shootouts, car chase, even a plane chase. And that apparently was Morello's grand plan, was to keep a plane on standby should anybody try to come kill him, and he will escape to the plane and fly off. Which, you somehow shoot down the plane with 45 caliber ammunition, which I guess is somewhat possible. I'm not exactly a ballistics expert. After following the doomed plane to the crash site, Tommy unloads a full drum into poor burning Morello, thus ending the great mob war that this story has told us. This level is another great experience for those not bored yet with the cover shootout and car chases, and have remained invested in the story. What follows can only be called JFK inspired. A new politician is rising to power within the city of Lost Haven, and he vows to crack down on mob activities running rampant throughout the city. You are dispatched to break into an abandoned prison where people who I can only assume are homeless live. You make your way through the creepy corridors, up to the tower, and find the rifle placed there for you. See the similarities? You proceed to shoot the politician in the middle of a public speech before making your escape through the prison, which is quickly crawling with police. This is a level in the game, if I'm being completely honest, is not my favorite. There's a really annoying save point, and if you die, you have to start back pretty far into the level and make your way back through the maze of a prison, which I happened to die several times to Turbo RoboCops 9000, and found this a little irritating. Nonetheless, you can steal a cop car, which I did, and make your escape. The next chapter is seemingly another routine mob chapter. Pick up the cargo down at the docks, probably a shootout that follows, but no, this one is a little different. Firstly, while on the way to the job, Paulie mentions the prospect of robbing a bank, which is big and not the most advisable course of action. Sam is quick to shoot the idea down, but Tommy will later show some interest. When you arrive at the warehouse, you must sneak through and stealthily take out the guards. No shootout. In fact, shooting will automatically fail the mission, which I found out the hard way, so do not shoot on this one. You eventually find what you're looking for and make your escape, which, no shootout, but you must escape the police chase in a pretty slow and cumbersome truck. When you do, the group discovers the cargo was drugs. Drugs they were not cut in on. This really frustrates them and clearly sows some seeds of resentment. Now, in words inspired by the intro to the Race podcast, the heist is on. In the following chapter, Tommy has agreed to help Paulie rob the bank. This is a pretty standard video game bank robbing sequence, and like most of the game, it's pretty well done. You get into another gunfight with the cops and must make your getaway in the classic car chase. After hitting the big score, Paulie agrees to meet Tom tomorrow to split the cash, but the next day when Tom arrives, he finds Paulie shot in the head. And thus begins the final chapter. This was a sad moment for me. Paulie was always the comedy relief throughout the game, and even though he was a little brutal and off his rocker, he was still a likable character. His death revealed something sinister was at stake. Tommy gets a phone call from Sam, who tells him the Don found out about the bank job and wanted him and Paulie dead. He offers to help Tommy out with getting out of town and asks him to meet him downtown. To anyone who consumes mob-related media, you already know what's about to happen. It's a setup. Yes, it's a setup, and what follows is a dramatic speech from Mr. Sam, grandstanding about how righteous he is or something like that. He then proceeds to have his men kill you. But Tom's the main character, so he fights back and proceeds to murder 30 hired hands and make his way to Sam. Sam pleads with him to let him go, like he did Frank, but Tommy does what needs to be done, and in that moment, he shoots him multiple times. This is the saga that has led Tommy Angelo to the diner to meet with the detective to offer information on himself and the entire Salieri operation in exchange for witness protection for him and his family. After a brief exchange, we are treated to an emotional epilogue that goes through Tommy's testimony, new life, his daughter's wedding, and then one day when he's old and gray and watering his garden years later in the 1950s, a car pulls up and it can only be one thing. Two men exit and call to him, "Mr. Angelo." When Tommy answers, yes, he is him, he's told the Don sends his regards and is blown away with a sawed-off shotgun. Quite the tragic and sad ending for our main character, but it really puts an emphasis on the grim realities of that life. Death is always going to come knocking, and you're never truly safe from the mob. This game mostly hinges on its story being engaging and a thrilling experience that pulls you in and keeps you wanting to progress through each shootout and car chase, and it is done to perfection in Mafia. Needless to say, the developers understood the assignment. I really enjoyed Mafia, so much so I've played it twice through, and I'm making this video to tell you about how great it is and how much I liked it. Let's talk about some of the characters and I'll share some of my thoughts. Tommy Angelo, the main character, is incredibly well done. The voice actor nails pretty much every line and brings his character to life, so to speak. I know that's a cliche line, but it couldn't be more real in regards to this character. You can really see and appreciate how he goes from innocent, hardworking cabbie to hardened criminal, and you can empathize with that journey, and it leaves you with the desire to know how it'll end. His romance with Sarah pulls at him throughout the game. Even though she's the daughter of a mobster, it's clear in subtle ways she doesn't want that for Tommy, and this dynamic is evident and well done throughout the story. He's hesitant to kill the innocent or already wounded. Several times he lets people go he was told to kill. He's a great wheelman, composed emotionally, and truly a character you can put yourself into whilst playing this game. Sarah is a great love interest in this story. She's not a paper character or blank slate. She's a deep woman who's seen a lot and is not afraid to stand up for herself or speak her mind. She loves Tom and she wants him to be safe, ultimately supporting him in leaving the life of crime behind him, and it really starts with that great level where you walk her home that night. I'm not one for romance novels or movies, and I don't typically look for it in my games either, but this was done in a grounded and real way. I felt it was incredible and enjoyed this aspect of the game. Paulie is an interesting creature. He frequently sees working girls, gambles, is pushing 40, and is not much more than a half-drunk gunman for the second most powerful mobster in town, an aspect he wrestles with throughout the game. Something Mafia does an incredible job of when you dive into it is building all these complex characters through subtle lines and relationships. So many characters have complex aspects to them, and deeper aspects than what you just initially see on the surface, and I couldn't appreciate that more, given how small and short the game is, roughly taking about 10 hours to complete. Paulie is a bit unhinged. He's shown to be violent and somewhat dangerous, beating people senseless seemingly for the thrill of it, not hesitating to kill anyone, and not above keeping secrets, which ends up playing the most pivotal role in his character with the bank robbery behind the Don's back, and the ultimate death of himself it leads to. Sam is slightly less explored than Paulie, which in and of itself is an interesting choice, but nonetheless he is shown to be a hardcore mobster, a cold killer, and a good soldier, living up to the good soldiers follow orders trope. He's loyal to his friends until it's them or the Don, but you still can empathize with his position, leaving you with another question to ask yourself: what would you have done in his situation? Which this game leaves you many, which I think is a sign of a good story when you're left questioning things afterwards. Don Salieri is your storybook Don. Loves cigars and fine drink. Will kill anyone for any reason he deems necessary, and wants things done when and how he wants them done. The voice actor here is another one I must truly applaud for bringing his character to life. Tremendously well done. Him and Tommy are some of the best in the game, but overall, everyone did a really good job. One thing I would say is I wish we could have explored the Don a little more. At times we get hints at his backstory and his time in Italy, but I would have liked to know more. But then again, I have to admit, that might have been the point, to leave it somewhat of a mystery, only for you to presume he must have had quite the rise to power, including at one time being in the same family as Morello. And maybe we'll get to explore some more of this in the upcoming Mafia, the Old Country. Now, Morello is somewhat of a mystery as well. We really don't get to meet him much or learn more about him other than he's in opposition to our family, and has more cops and men and politicians on the payroll, thus presenting substantial roadblocks for our crew throughout the game. He is behind most situations you find yourself in: crooked cops, informants who gave you up, his men in general causing headaches and disrupting your own activities. He serves his purpose, but of course, as someone who has really enjoyed exploring this world, I would really like to know more about him. Frank is also somewhat mysterious, although what we do know about him and the Don's backstory does largely come from himself. He offers some advice and hovers around before betraying the family and dipping out. He is also the source of one of the major "what would you have done in that situation" questions of this game when Tommy is sent to kill him. Answer the question down below in the comments. Would you have let Frank go, or would you blow him away right in front of his family? That wraps up our main characters, and there are only a few side characters left to note. Ralphie offers an interesting view into how people with disabilities were treated in the 1930s, and also reminds me of Jesse from Fast and Furious. No, I will not explain further. Vinny is straight up Italian, and is a muscular weapons expert. He is cool. Luigi doesn't say much, and you wonder why he lost his nerve and retired to being a waiter and a cook. The grizzled old Irish detective is Irish as f***, and I can say that because I'm part Irish. He pours liquor in his coffee, which is an excellent choice. I can speak from experience. This covers all of our major side characters. Overall, I think the cast of characters really makes this story what it is. Without such excellent performances, immersing you into the world and carrying you scene to scene with gritty, authentic voices, you may not find this game as interesting as it is. They did a phenomenal job and should be commended. Now, I was going to go over some differences between the Definitive Edition and the original game, but this video is already very long and I can summarize it rather quickly. Improved graphics, improved mechanics, new soundtrack with some originals included, lighting and effect changes, additional cutscenes and voice lines, along other improvements. It would seem they really pulled out all the stops to make this remake, and if at some point in the future I have the opportunity to play the original, I definitely will, and perhaps will make a video on it. In conclusion, Mafia the Definitive Edition is awesome, and one of my favorite games I've played so far. If you haven't played it, I encourage you to give it a try, if it seems like your cup of tea. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and subscribing. Perhaps follow me on the old Twitch, twitch.tv/wildbigskies. If you made it this far into the video, comment mob ties, and you'll have good luck forever. I hope to see you around, and until next time, peace out.